Hey, how are you? My name is Felt, and welcome back to Final Fantasy XIV. Today we're going to be talking about how mitigation is the entire party's job. The entire party. I mean tanks, healers, and DPS. All roles have a way to help mitigate damage, or effectively mitigate by applying regenerations, healing bonuses, or shielding. Now I'm going to start this video with an asterisk by saying I'm not going to specifically talk about, shield healers' ability to shield, because I feel like it's almost heavily implied that a shield will mitigate incoming damage. So I'm going to start with that disclaimer. I'm not going to specifically talk through shield healers shielding. I'm not going to give an in-depth discussion on Spread Adlo versus Panheima. I'm going to generally be talking about stuff that says reduces damage taken, or special abilities by DPS that effectively do similar things. Alright, so let's get started. Let's start by talking about melees. Now, all melees have 3 different tools that are personal mits or party mits in their kits, those being Feint, Second Wind, and Bloodbath. Let's talk about what the more basic ones, the more personal ones do first. Let's talk about Second Wind. Second Wind is just a big old chunk of HP. It's a 500 potency cure that scales based off of your stats, meaning that it can be an incredibly effective heal. I've had Second Winds pop for upwards of 20k if they crit, which is pretty impressive. There's also Bloodbath, which converts a portion of physical damage dealt into HP for 20 seconds. It is very powerful. It's very good to be popping inside of high damage sections of raids to just mitigate the amount of healing your healers need to do to you in particular, and maybe cast less GCD heals as a whole. Now let's talk about Feint. Feint is the most important, unique to melee's mitigation there is, because it does something that no other mitigation can do. It lowers the target's physical damage dealt by 10%. No other mit technically does that specifically, so it will stack differently with other types of mitigation, making it more effective. Now, there is a second line here that is very important. It is actually a change that went through in Endwalker that I'm not sure if most people know about or not, so I'm just going to make sure to bring attention to it. It also reduces magic damage dealt by 5%. That's new, and that's very useful, meaning that if you don't know what type of damage a raid wide is dealing, you just know it's a raid wide. Feint's good. Feint's just good. It's either 10% if it happened to be physical, or 5% if it happened to be magical. That's pretty powerful. That's incredibly useful. That is the melee's unique personal mitigations. We're going to go through one at a time, kind of rapid fire these next ones, and talk about the personal mitigations of each melee job. Monk, Riddle of Earth. Riddle of Earth just gives you 20% flat damage reduction for 10 seconds. That's a lot of mitigation for a melee. It's very useful. Please use Riddle of Earth for everyone's sake. Mantra. Not exactly a mitigation, but it's an effective mitigation because it increases the amount of HP restored by healing actions by 10%, and it lasts 15 seconds, meaning that for 15 seconds your healers might have to use less healing. Very powerful. Dragoon. They get nothing. I don't know why. Dragoon doesn't have any personal or unique mitigations. Ninja. This gets Shade Shift, which is a 20% of your max HP shield for 20 seconds. Pretty useful if you can just pop it before big raid wides to just take away some of the stress from your healers. Very useful in prog situations, because Ninja has less base HP than other melees by default. Samurai. You have Third Eye, and as much as I like to meme that it makes you immune, that's not what it actually does. It does reduce the amount of damage taken by the next attack by 10%. It only lasts for 4 seconds, but it is on a 15-second cooldown, so it is a very short recast to reduce the amount of damage you take by 10%. It does not apply to damage over times, though, because it has to be the next attack that hits you. That's an important distinction. And Reaper. Reaper has Arcane Crest, which gives you a shield, which equates to 10% of your max HP. That lasts for 5 seconds. And if that shield breaks, it restores HP to the party with a tick cure potency of 50 for 15 seconds, meaning that it will tick 5 times for a 250 cure potency. This is the nerfed version. I believe it used to be 500 potency almost. But 250 potency of cure is not to be sneezed at for the whole party. A lot of healers might not notice it, but inside of prog situations, inside of optimization situations, it can be very useful. Phys ranged have personal mit in the form of Second Wind, like melees do. Another 500 potency chunk cure, which is pretty powerful. And then all 3 physical ranged have a unique party mitigation And by unique, I mean they have different names, however they don't stack. I don't know why they don't have shared names similar to like how all tanks are reprisal. Maybe they just like the flair. Either way, all of them have a unique party mitigation that reduces damage taken by self and nearby party members by 10%. It lasts for 15 seconds and it is on a 90-second cooldown. It's a very powerful ability. You should be using it effectively on raid wides that need just a little bit more mitigation, or pairing them with Feint and Addle so that you, DPS as a whole, can mitigate for the party very well. Let's talk about the individual unique mitigations that each of the phys range have as well. Bard, Nature's Min, not really a mitigation, still very useful. It is a single person buff that increases recovery via healing actions by 20%. It falls under the effective mitigations category because it means your healers might have to heal less. You throw it on one of your tanks or yourself, and all of a sudden you are getting healed more. Or throw it on your caster or melee, who just takes a bunch of damage during a certain part because of party positioning. Or throw it on your healer because they take a bunch of damage during a certain mechanic. It's a pretty powerful tool. I feel like it's highly underutilized. Machinist, you get nothing. As per usual, Machinist is getting shafted. Dancer. Now, Dancer actually has two. They first of all have Curing Waltz, which is a 300 cure potency that triggers on yourself and then off of your dance partner, meaning it's technically two heals going off at the same time. So if the entire party is stacked up, it is two separate 300 potency cures. It can be very useful if your party is in, say, two light parties and you and your dance partner are in opposite parties, or you're just all stacked as a big old pile of 8, in which case it's now just a 600 potency cure. It's very useful. Let's talk about Dancer's very unique other one, though, in Improvisation. Now, Improvisation is unique and weird in some ways, because one, it's not really something you use in combat most of the time, and two, it's actually incredibly powerful. So it's an ability that during downtime, you activate it, and you just kind of sit there. And you're dancing, and you're increasing healing, and you're regenerating HP over time for anyone inside the circle. And you're gaining stacks of a buff as you go. When you get up to 4 total stacks, if you end the ability, you get a nice little health shield. It's not a very powerful health shield, but it is still a nice health shield. The regen effect continues to tick after the end of the ability for 100 cure potency per tick over 15 seconds, making it 500 potency healing over the course of its duration. Now, why do I say not normally used during combat? You can tap the button once and effectively flash it, use it as a weave between buttons, and it will immediately apply the regen to all people nearby. You won't be getting any of the shielding, but everyone will be getting a 500 potency heal over the next 15 seconds. Well, 100 cure potency every tick adds up to 500. You get what I'm saying, I hope. It's a very powerful tool to be able to just flash and activate. Once again, very useful if everyone is stacked up, meaning that Dancer can effectively apply 1100 potency of healing if everyone is stacked up by hitting a Curing Waltz and then flashing an Improvisation out. It could be a very, very useful tool. Alright, let's talk about casters. Now, melees had Feint, casters have Addle. Addle lowers target's physical damage dealt by 5% and magical damage dealt by 10%. It's kind of the inverse of Feint. Once again, doesn't matter what damage type the raid wide is, this is still going to be effective and useful because it applies both. A little more effective on magical, the way that Feint's a little more effective on physical, but it's still very, very useful. Individual mix of the casters have, though. Black Mage has Mana Ward, a 30% of max HP barrier that lasts for 20 seconds. Mana Ward is a very powerful personal shield that makes you much, much harder to kill. However, it is on a 2-minute cooldown, but it's still a very effective personal mitigation. Summoner. Now, Summoner is weird. Let's start by talking about Radiant Aegis, which is a 20% of your max HP shield. You have 2 charges of it, but it can only be used while your Eggy is out on the battlefield. Meaning that if you have used Summon Garuda, Titan, or Ifrit, or if Bahamut or Phoenix are out, you actually can't use it. It does last for 30 seconds though, so you do have opportunities to use it during times when your Eggy actually is out on field, and then get use of it later because you had the shield with, you know, still 15 seconds left before it expired when the raid wide went out. They do also have some interesting party healing in their Phoenix form. Everlasting Flight is a heal over time that activates when they just simply summon Phoenix. It is 700 cure potency total, 100 potency per tick over 21 seconds. It's very, very useful. However, you can't really plan around it. You can let your healers know to just pay attention to when you have Everlasting Flight out and to not need to heal as much, or maybe only apply a single regen because you're helping with the regens. But it is kind of hard to play around unless you and your healers coordinate. It's still very useful heal over time and can be powerful in the right situation. You also have Rekindle, which grants, first of all, a flat cure potency of 400, and then after you go down to a certain amount of HP left, it will grant a second healing over time of 200 potency per tick over 15 seconds, adding up to 1,000 total potency, which is a lot, which means this is 1,400 potency total. Personally, I recommend just throwing this on whichever tank is main tanking at the time, because it will just be useful for them. They're more often than not going to be one of the only people under 75%. But you can throw it on yourself in case there's a mechanic where the party is spread and you feel like you could use just a little extra personal healing. I know during P5, 6, and 7, there's plenty of times when the party is spread out, and you might be afraid you're not going to get enough healing, and Rekindle can be very useful in those situations. Red Mage. This totally isn't being recorded after I finished editing the rest of the video because I realized I forgot it. That's crazy. Red Mage has a slightly unique but very powerful party mitt in the form of Magic Barrier. It reduces damage taken by magic damage by 10%. Very powerful. Also increases HP recovered by healing actions by 5%. Also very powerful. Very similar to Fey Elimination from Scholar, which you'll see later on in this video. It's a very powerful tool. Use it to supplement other raid-wide mitigation when your Addle is on cooldown. Let's talk about tanks. We're not going to be talking about tanks' personal mitts too much, because I have another video out on the channel about that already. I believe I have a pretty long, in-depth breakdown of all 4 tanks and their personal mitts on the channel already. So go watch that video if you want more in-depth stuff about tanks. We're talking about the party mitts here, though, and they're all very important, so they did deserve a spot in the video. Let's talk about the one that all tanks have, Reprisal. Reprisal is a 60-second cooldown ability that reduces damage dealt by nearby enemies. It only has a 5 yalm radius, so please be near to stuff when you cast Reprisal. For 10 seconds. Pretty useful tool. Very similar to Faint Addle. Same general use case scenarios as well. Typically used for raid wides, sometimes used for back-to-back tank busters. Pretty powerful tool. Now all tanks also have a 90-second party mitt, so they're all going to get talked about a little bit to explain them in the context of party mitigation. Okay, Paladin has some really weird cases about it, so we're going to go through Paladin's weirdness like one by one. Divine Veil is a barrier that is 10% of your max HP that also provides a 400 potency cure upon activation, which is pretty solid. It's on a 90-second cooldown. However, it has to be activated by a healing effect. Casting Holy Spirit or your Confetti or combos does count as a healing effect, though, so you can self-activate it. However, if you need to activate it outside of your Requiescat or Confetti or combo windows, you are going to have to ask your healers to GCD heal to make sure that barrier activates. Now, Paladin also has one of the only extra unique party mitts in the game in Passage of Arms. You increase block rate to 100%, meaning that everyone will block the incoming hit, which reduces damage by, I believe, 25%? I could be incorrect. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe a block is 25% damage reduction. And they will also only take 85% of damage inflicted. That second part is really unique because it is not mitigation. It is taking a percentage of the damage dealt, meaning that it stacks very, very well with mitigation. If something deals 100 damage, and then you're taking 85% of that, you're taking 85 damage. However, if you're reducing the damage dealt down to 90 through Reprisal, multiply that by the 0.85, you're only taking 76 damage now. Which is different from if they directly stacked, because then it would technically be 15% met and 10% met, which don't exactly equal 25% met. It's a whole math conversation. Just know that it's really good, and it is something that you can quote-unquote flash, meaning that because of how server tick works, if you activate your wings for like a second and then move, the effect will be active on people that were behind you in your wings for a little bit longer than the activation time of the wings themselves. I mean, you can use it as a weave and apply party mit. Very, very useful. I nearly forgot to mention it, but intervention is also a kind of party mit. These party mits that are a single target that can get thrown onto other members are going to be talked about a little bit. The bottom line is it provides healing, blocking, and damage reduction to somebody. It's a very powerful tool. Once again, you want more in-depth details about these tanks, go watch my other videos. Warrior's special unique 90-second mit is Shake It Off. Shake It Off gives a barrier that is 15% of maximum HP, which is a pretty big shield considering you're a tank and you have a lot of max HP. It also gives a flat cure of 300 on the front end, which is pretty useful if you're using the shield before big raid wide, as it helps the healer's efforts to top up the party. And it can also be buffed up to, I believe, 21% by using Thrill of the Battle, Vengeance, and Bloodwetting all before using Shake It Off. It absorbs the effects and adds an extra 2% for each effect removed, which is an extra 6%, which is 21%. I can, in fact, do math. Warrior also technically has the ability of Nascent Flash, which applies a shield and healing to a target and reduces damage taken by them as well. However, you personally do not get the mitigation anymore, so it's only mitigation for your target. Dark Knight. They have Dark Missionary. Very straightforward. Reduces magic damage taken. Specifically magic damage taken. Keep that in mind. You do need to know what type of damage a boss is dealing if you want to get the most value out of something like Dark Missionary. Dark Knight also gets honorary mentions to Oblation, which is a 10% mid ability that can be thrown out amongst party members. It has 2 charges, very useful for certain mechanics like shared tank busters or just AoEs that has the party spreading out very heavily, and sometimes like a caster or a healer might need extra mit. And with the Blackest Night, which is a big old chunky health shield that you can give out. It's an extra 25% HP onto a target, and that's just very useful. Tank busters spread because of needing to spread for a mechanic, keeping healers and or casters alive, just a very useful ability in general, so it gets an honorary mention here. Gunbreaker. Gunbreaker also has a magic mitigation ability in Heart of Light. It's very similar to Dark Missionary. I believe they technically can stack, but it is at very reduced effectiveness. So try and make sure that you're not going to use those at the same time if you're running a Gunbreaker Dark Knight comp, which is pretty common right now, as both of these jobs are the highest damage jobs at the moment. Honorary mentions for Heart of Corundum, which gives mitigation and a heal on a delay. The delay that goes away if you drop below a certain threshold. Think Excog, think Rekindle. And minor honorary mention to Aurora. It's a little Babel region, 200 cure potency over 18 seconds. It does add up to around 1200 cure potency, so it can be pretty effective, but it is very slow. It is very effective though, and it is very good to help the party stay topped up, neither yourself or your co-tank, a little bit more full on HP. Healers. Now I'm going to clarify that I'm not really going to talk too much about shielding in here, or too much about healing over times in here. This is mostly going to be about true mitigations that just flat out reduce the damage taken. So, let's get started. White Mage. Aqua Veil. Pretty powerful thing. Reduces damage taken by party member or self by 15% for 8 seconds. Mostly used on tank busters. Still effective. Still can be used to throw it onto a wayward healer or caster who might need a little bit of help. Temperance. Their big boy mit. 20 seconds of 10% party mit. And it is all damage taken. So it is no qualifiers like some other mitigations out there, which is really nice. It does increase healing magic potency by 20% as well, making it a very, very powerful mitigation. It's no wonder it's on a 2-minute cooldown. Scholar. Scholar has a lot of mitigation in the kit. Let's start with Fey Illumination, which is increasing healing magic potency by 10% and reduces magic damage taken by 5%. A very, very effective tool, especially as it can be weaved as an OGCD. Other very powerful mit that Scholar has is Sacred Soil, and Sacred Soil gets a lot of talk time because it actually makes you only take 90% of damage dealt, similar to the way that Paladin Wings makes you only take 85% of damage dealt. So it stacks very well with other similarly phrased party mits, and stacks even better with differently phrased party mits because the total damage output done after damage reduction calculations is what goes into you, which is very, very powerful. Expedience is their last mit. Sorry, Expedient. Expedience is the buff it gives you. Expedience is movement speed. It's kind of party mit because your party will probably die less when they can run faster. The big deal is that the Desperate Measures effect reduces damage taken by 10%, is active for 20 freaking seconds. That's a really long time for a party mit. 20 seconds is a massive amount of time. It is very, very useful. And the movement speed is not to be scoffed at either. Astrologian. You have Exaltation, which is a pretty powerful ability, reduces damage taken by 10%, and then gives 500 cure potency at the end of the effect. Really good. Their big party mit, though, is Collective Unconscious, which reduces damage taken by 10%, and then applies a regen for 15 seconds of 100 potency per tick, adding up to 500 more potency of healing. It's very powerful. It can also be flashed, similar to Paladin Wings, or to Dancer's Improv. Very, very useful ability. You can just kind of tap the button and then go back to what you were doing and still have the effect for a little bit of time. You can use it right before a raid wide hits to not take too much downtime from the raid wide. It's a very, very powerful tool. Sage. Now, Scholar has a bunch of mitigation. Sage does too, but for different reasons. Number one mitigation that they have is Karakale. 15 seconds duration, 10% party mit, less, and a recast of only 30 seconds, meaning that if you just keep hitting Karakale off cooldown, you can almost effectively mitigate everything by 10% and also apply a regen at the same time. Karakale is a very, very powerful tool. However, it's not up all the time, and times when it's not, Hollows takes over. Hollows actually got buffed recently to also provide a 300 potency shield on top of its 10% mit for 20 seconds. It is a very, very powerful tool, very similar to Expedient from Scholar. However, it is just a shield and a heal as opposed to movement speed. So, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And there we are. This probably very long video has now been brought to an end. Mitigation is the entire party's responsibility, and I hope I brought to your attention the fact that the entire party has forms of mitigation, personal or party, and there's a lot more of it than you might have initially thought, and some of it might function different than you might have initially thought as well. For those of you who may not be caught up on the latest updates and tooltips and abilities, hopefully this was somewhat useful to you. I know I didn't go too into detail on tanks and healers, however, they have a lot of information if we talk about them. I have other videos on them on the channel somewhere. I'd link it here if I knew how to do that, but I don't. So, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Like the video if you liked it. Leave comments in the comments section for everything that I got wrong. Regardless of all that, I hope to catch you in the next one.